So I don't often go off for a rant, but in this particular situation, I'll make an exception. One of my favorite literary compilations is The Lord of the Rings. And I absolutely love the books and I love the films, and I have a certain amount of love for The Hobbit. In fact, it was kind of my gateway into fantasy, like so many others. And yet, here I was awaiting something great, a place where the Peter Jackson classics came from. That's right, Warner Brothers. I was expecting them to deliver on a property that I had such high regard for. And, well, they've absolutely disappointed me. But much to my surprise, they've absolutely upset people you would think would agree with them, but they don't. And it calls into question everything that's not Tolkien being, well, called Tolkien, whether it be the Rings of Power or the abomination of the War of Rohirrim. I think we need to talk about the War of Rohirrim, and I think you're going to find a surprise in The Verge. From an article in The Verge, we've got The Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim is a soulless return to Middle Earth. Yeah, yeah, soulless. That's probably the right terminology. I would say this is a disappointment. It's disparaging, it's disrespectful, and a lot of other huge D's. The director Kenji Kamiyama's new Lord of the Rings anime film feels like what happens when you try to turn a footnote into a feature length story. Well, I'm not sure I could have put it better myself. Anyway, before we move on a little further, please double check that you're subscribed to the channel. Just look down there, make sure that it says subscribed with a little gray button. If not, turn that little red button to gray. It's absolutely free. You can take advantage of that offer and turn on the notifications so you don't miss anything. Because usually I'm delivering at least one video a day, if not more, and an entire live stream pretty much 7 days of the week. I would appreciate it greatly. We're on our way to 50K, and I can't do it without you. So let me say in advance, thank you for subscribing to the channel. Onward! Warner Brothers Discovery has been very vocal about its desire to keep producing an untold number of stories based on J.R.R. Tolkien's books in hopes of recreating the monumental success that they had with Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings film. Even though it wasn't a Warner Brothers production, the Rings of Power proved that Tolkien's appendices could be fashioned into riveting explorations of Middle Earth's history. Well, that's where we diverge from The Verge. I don't agree with that particular statement. I suspect that they're just trying to capitalize on the things that they own, and they don't want to lose control of the things that they own, which is the rights for Lord of the Rings. Now, there's plenty of material within Lord of the Rings that was skipped over during the course of the films, and there was a lot of invented stuff coming out of The Hobbit. We can set those things aside and just say there's still a lot of room to tell some stories that it wouldn't be hard to talk about, especially if you have access to the Silmarillion. But I digress. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the new animated film, The Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim. Warhiram, Warrim, I've heard it many different ways. Based on Tolkien's Lord of the Rings Appendix A, director Kenji Kamiyama's, who did Ghost in the Shell, but he actually did the standalone complex, Blood, the Last Vampire, which again, watch at your own risk. The War of Rohirrim is an attempt at creating the War of Rohirrim is an attempt at creating a mountain-sized fantasy epic out of a molehill of footnotes. At times, the film comes close to being a beautiful presentation of Middle Earth, and you can feel it trying to bring something of a feminist energy to the Lord of the Rings canon. Oh, it doesn't just try, that's all it is. This is a character that was spoken very little of. Absent that, there isn't anything to go on. So, this is a feminist fairy tale made up out of whole cloth. Not really very appealing, at least not to somebody like me, or probably most Tolkien fans, considering, well, it really doesn't have any of that ideology in it, nor does it have a lot of the other modern day storytelling elements in it, which is good because those things are being rejected right now. Whereas the old Tolkien stories and the older films were, well, right up everybody's alley. So much so that people not only go back and revisit them, they introduce new generations to them and also to the books, keeping alive a fandom that it doesn't seem like any of these morons are able to, well, collapse and destroy. And it could have been very much different. We could have had something that was absolutely gorgeous, akin to some of the very early works prior to the live action that Peter Jackson brought to us that would have been worthy, at least visually. But the moment that we got a hint, a suggestion, or an outright statement that told us what this was going to be, a feminist fantasy, we found ourselves on the way out the door. And, well, based on the box office, so did everybody else. With the War of Rohirrim, whichever you'd like to say, focus on Hera, who is never named in Tolkien's work, and her armed minder, Olwen, that would be Lorraine Ashbourne. You can see the screenwriters Jeffrey Addis, Will Matthews, Phoebe Gittins, and Artie Papagiorgio attempting to rework details from Appendix A into a more fully fleshed out narrative centering the women of Middle Earth. That goal feels like part of the reason the story is narrated by Rohirrim Shield Maiden Eowyn, played by Miranda Otto, reprising the role from the live action Jackson films. That detail reinforces how Warner Brothers Discovery and New Line Cinema see War of Rohirrim as an expansion of their Lord of the Rings canon. I can assure you, nobody else does. Worse yet, reviewers, including those at The Verge, haven't really enjoyed this much, saying there is little nuance to anyone's characterizations or motivations. Here's another headstrong princess whose gender keeps her from being seen as a valuable warrior. And Wolf reads as so transparently evil that he's hard to buy as any kind of villain capable of outmaneuvering his enemies. That's right. Bad men, dumb. Underappreciated women, smart. Oh, the nuance. Continuing from The Verve, these weaknesses would be easier to overlook if the movie had more to offer in the way of exciting visuals. But when the War of Rohirrim is clearly trying to impress you with soaring shots of Middle Earth from Great Eagle's perspectives, it never feels like the movie is taking advantage of the animation's ability to present fantasy worlds in ways that aren't possible in live action. And again, I would suggest that not only the writers, but also the creators behind the vision of this particular film probably have very limited life experience and don't understand anyone else's point of view, let alone their neighbors, or perhaps even more originally, Tolkien's. And while the film War of Rohirrim has not officially been released in the United States as of yet, its overseas box office is terribly embarrassing at a paltry $2 million from 3,410 screens in 31 territories. Those are not great numbers, and they're not going to improve. I strongly suspect that as it opens this weekend, starting tomorrow, no one will be there to greet it, or very few. And as someone who's had the privilege of seeing the large majority of this film via clips and other means, I can tell you I have zero inclination to go and see it in full effect on a giant theater screen. But what about you? Are you interested in seeing the War of Rohirrim, a story based on nothing, with a character whose name was perhaps conjured out of thin air at the very best? Are you more inclined to watch more feminized Lord of the Rings since, well, the Rings of Power? Or are you more likely to ditch this film in favor of something, well, a little more entertaining, like maybe Gladiator 2, which is starting to fall off, or perhaps even the newly minted superhero film, Craven the Hunter? Let me know your thoughts about this new adventure down in the comments section below, and let's have a little bit of a chat. And once again, a quick reminder to check out that you're still subscribed to the channel and that you've turned on the notification bell. Oh, and hit the like while you're down there too. Until next time, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands because it's good hygiene, especially in the winter. And until next time, see ya.